Welcome back to House Guest. This is Hailey Low-Fennel. I'm a psychic medium, and this is the podcast that connects you to the other side. Okay, so I gave a reading to the Molly McLean from The Works maybe like 2 weeks ago, and it was for the podcast, and we got like a little bit into it in the first part of the reading, and then I had to stop and get back on, and I forgot to hit record. So Molly's reading is not what you're going to be listening to today, though we might put like that one little section in the beginning in there because something really interesting happened in it that I'll explain in a second. But first of all, thank you, Molly, for coming back on. I
Yeah,
want to
of
make
course.
sure that your voice is heard. So thank you for being here.
Mhm.
And there's when that happened, I had this thought in my head. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's never happened. It's been a fear of mine for the past
Yeah.
year and a half or however long I've been doing the podcast. I think it's actually almost 2 years now. That I would forget to do that, and I haven't until that moment. But a few months before that, I was talking with my producer Lindsay, and I've been wanting to like transition the podcast a little bit. Like I love giving one-on-one readings and group readings. I love my job more than anything else in the world. That's not true. I love my kids, my husband, all those good things. But I do. I really, really feel passionate about what I do, and I feel lucky to be in this position. But we have been wanting to kind of transition the podcast to more of a conversational podcast because the most fun part is like seeing how the readings affect people or just hearing from the people that I give readings to, like what their life is like and their spiritual connections, anything and everything. So maybe this happened for a reason. That was my second thought that I had after I had a little bit of a doom and gloom thought.
My like immediate thought was that that happened for a reason because we tried to do that reading like four different times and
Yeah.
kept rescheduling it, kept rescheduling it, kept rescheduling it. And then we get on that morning and your mic was broken and you were like,
Yes.
this has never happened before. Like this
Yeah,
mic
like
was
it would
just
not
working.
go in. Yeah.
And then that noise started. So we started over, and then the noise started again. And
Yeah.
immediately after you said that you forgot to record, I was like, I think that this is my people on the other side being like, I really wanted this conversation to be private.
So we're gonna play the clip, I think, for them from the very beginning of the reading the part. People, this will sound familiar, where I like close my eyes and I kind of lead you through a breathing exercise. It was so loud. It sounded like a million crickets or cicadas
It
were
was
like
so loud.
booming in the room. And I'm usually pretty good at blocking things out in the middle of a reading. Like I've been in readings where people have brought their kids, babies have been crying, dogs have been barking. I've been in offices, been in cars, like the whole thing. Especially when people connect on Zoom, there tends to be like something going on. And like I've never ever not been able to block it out. And I was like, I'll be right back. I was like,
Yeah.
let's log off.
No, it was crazy. And like when, like for the listeners, when we're on the screen on this little like kind of Zoom call type of thing, you can see the noise level, like the green to yellow to red, like that
Yeah.
level. And it was like red the entire time. It was so loud.
It was, yeah. And then I remember like when we popped back on, I was like,
It's
okay, like
done.
this is manageable.
And
Like
it
I
like
could, and then it just
came back.
got louder. It was the strangest thing. And I
Yeah.
do think that I have a few theories around it, and I'm curious what you think. My theory is, and you guys have heard this before, like spirits, those on the other side can kind of play with technology. It happens because we've kind of seen it so much now. Like if you turn on like a ghost hunters program or anything like that, they're using these like things that pick up on electromagnetic fields and energy and the whole thing. And so there's something kind of like embedded in our subconscious at this point where it's like, ooh, like spirit can play with technology. They can turn on TVs or radios or do funny things. I believe it, one, because I think it's fun and it's just like another way for them to try to connect in with us. And it also just happens every once in a while, but not quite so loudly as it did that time. But I did
Hmm.
think, I was like, that's kind of like a cool little coincidence. And I do think you're right. Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be okay that the reading wasn't recorded, even though I remember being like, shoot, I felt like that was a really good one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But will you start off by telling everybody what you do? I know you from the works, and I'd love for you to talk
Hmm.
about that and, of course, everything else.
Yeah. My name is Molly. I'm originally from Boston. I moved down to Charleston in 2015 for college, and I went to the College of Charleston. Um, I was initially going into like the music industry field. I studied arts management with a concentration in the music industry. So I was working at the Charleston Music Hall for a really long time. And in the midst of college and all of that, I found yoga and I started
Yeah.
getting deeper into it. I did my yoga teacher training, met Sarah, and when they opened up the works in like late 2018, I want to say. I joined the team with them and I was newly 22 years old and I was like just graduating from college. And so I've been there since. I've been there for 6 years now. Um, and I think that for, I think at the beginning, my reasoning for getting into yoga was because I was a cheerleader my whole life and I needed that upside down, twisty movement type of thing. Um, and then it, I think, became more so about a way to connect with people and a way to um, learn more about people aside from just like small talk conversation. And
Yeah.
it's really been a way for me to kind of like, rather than like, more so than writing, like how you like get your thoughts and feelings down on paper if you're a writer, like I get my thoughts and my feelings out in like leading people through movement.
Ooh, I really love that. I love that idea that that's how you get your thoughts out, like
Yeah.
leading people through movement. There's something about movement and mediumship for me. Like, and it's not me leading people through movement. It's me getting led through movement by all
Hmm.
means. But when I find myself like in those zones is when I tend to have these kind of aha moments. And I think a lot of people will say something similar. I always say like it's really hard to go on a long walk and not come back with at least a little bit of clarity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because when you move your body, it frees up so much space for those things to come in.
Hmm.
But I love that you get it while you're leading people. Do you feel like that's one of your ways? Like if you're ever feeling confused about something or a big decision coming up, do you find that you're more clear on the other end of leading someone or
100%.
people?
And I
Yeah.
think it's because um, watching people kind of like in the struggle and the way that they like I don't know, it's that like I can't watch myself third person when I'm doing the workout and like when I'm,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like there's something about being around 50 something people working as hard as they possibly can and being the one
Yeah.
who's not doing it and watching it
I
is
love
so
that.
crazy.
That is wild. That's like that. Oh, that's like there's something on the tip of my brain with that. But I like that idea of of course like trying to relate it to me. I'm like, ooh, like I get so much out of doing readings for people, and then sometimes when I try to give myself a reading or look at my own shit, right? It's like kind of hard. It's sometimes
Hmm.
it's like hard to look at your own stuff. But whenever I have something pretty powerful going on, and by that I mean like whenever I'm really unclear about something but I know I need to be clear about it, it's oftentimes when I'm giving readings to other people that I'm like, oh shit, that's for me.
Yeah. Right.
Like
Exactly.
for them too, of course. I'm like, oh, they just like
Yeah.
said that for me as
Yeah.
well, and I get it and I hear you. So sometimes even if I'm not paying attention to it for myself, they'll find a way of like coming in. Is that kind of how you feel? You're like, all
Totally.
right, like I
Yeah. And
see.
like if any of the people who are listening have taken my classes a lot of the time when I'll do like the heart work and more of like the talking from my own self rather than just like spitting off breath work and cues is typically at the end of class. And
Mhm.
it's always like I'll go into the room having this kind of simple idea of what like a lesson that I could kind of talk about or maybe that like could have to do with some of the movements that we're doing. And then I'll get to the end after watching everyone do everything that we've done, and I'm like, and I'll have a completely different perspective and message and lesson and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
the coolest.
Yeah.
I love that. I
Yeah.
bet you've also, I mean, you've been there for so many years now. I bet there's also some people that consistently come and take your class that
Mhm.
you've literally seen them transform mentally, physically, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
In so many ways that it's like, all right, like there's something to the
Yeah.
work to getting in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Well, I love how you went from like cheerleading and then you kind of landed here in
Hmm.
general. But I bet people are really curious. What is it that keeps you there? That like makes you feel like this is it. This is for me.
Hmm. Ooh, that's a really good question. Um, what keeps me there is that I think for the first time in my life, I'm in a space that I don't feel like I'm constantly climbing the ladder with someone trying to pull on my ankles.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have hands of women that are under my feet that are like
Yeah. There's
pushing me.
something like cool about the works in Charleston.
Yeah.
Not to generalize, but I just think that there's a lot of amazing women in Charleston, no
Like
matter what.
so much support.
Yeah, that's like I see you and I want to support you and I
Yeah.
want you to like keep doing what you're doing. It just feels good to work here. And I know there's some people listening to the podcast that like don't live in Charleston are
Hmm.
like, darn it, like I can't move to Charleston and I would like
Yeah.
that. We'll support you too. We got
Yeah.
you. And I really, really like that. And I think you see that at the works too.
Yeah.
Like it's a
I think so
very
too. Just
visceral
like
thing.
instructors in each other's rooms all the time,
Yeah.
people hanging out with people outside of the room. Like so many of the clients are the people who I hang out with are my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I asked that, like, what keeps you there? Because sometimes I have people that come and sit with me and they're in the middle of like contemplating their career or they're in the
Hmm.
middle of like growth or trying to get out of something or into something, whatever it may be. For the first time in my life, I mean, it's been a few years now, but I'm like, oh, I can't imagine leaving what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It feels so different than it's ever felt
Yeah.
before, where I'm like, oh,
That's
this is it. Now, like, there's something else I'm supposed to be doing. I know that.
mhm.
But I know that this is what leads me there.
Yeah.
And I like just through doing what I'm doing have learned to like be patient where I think in the past it could have been like, okay, so let me just quit this. I'll start working on these other things that interest me. And then it will be, I'll have more time for X, Y, and Z where I'm like, no, 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 like I have time to do it now and I'm going to keep this thing going because I
Mhm.
like know that I'm meant to work through it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I'm going to kind of like change topics here a little bit.
Hmm.
Is there anything from the reading, even though we didn't get the recording of it, that you wanted to talk about or that came through or that sunk in later?
Well, I think the probably like the most profound part of the reading for me was that it was like the first person that came through for you was my grandmother.
I love
And she said, "Isn't it funny that I could make that happen?" And she was talking about the sound.
Oh, I love that.
And you were saying that it made you think about your grandparents' farmhouse growing up and the cicadas that you would hear. And for me, that sound made me think of my grandparents' lake house up in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And then you said that she was saying that she's so excited about what I'm planning. What I'm planning. And me and my fiance are planning our wedding at that lake house in New Hampshire.
I love it so
So,
much. I've
like,
got a little bit of chills just now.
yeah. And I feel like
Yeah.
she made you bring up, like, my grandparents' farmhouse so that I could be like, the lake house.
Yeah.
And so that for me was like really, really big. I really loved that. And then at one point, you asked me if I had any questions, and I asked if my grandparents knew JR, my fiance. And you said, yep, they absolutely do, and that they were like with some of his people on the other side, and that a younger, like brotherly figure stepped forward. And we have a friend, primarily JR's friend, who a couple years ago now was killed in a motorcycle accident. And I know for sure, I know it, that like, and that's someone who I really wanted to hear from because I didn't
Yeah.
get to know him all that much and I really wanted to. And so that for me was like a big piece of closure because I am very terrified of death and the other side and
Are
dying.
you?
And
Yeah.
yes, I have like severe health anxiety. Like it creeps me out. And that was my first time knowing someone young.
Yeah. Hmm.
And to be able to like communicate is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I thank you for sharing that with us because you're not alone. Like there's so many people that fear that same thing. Is there anything that you do that when you kind of when you feel that fear creeping up on you even more than normal, is there anything that you do that helps kind of calm it down?
I mean, like honestly, just like because it'll send me into like a panic attack. Like I have a weighted
Yeah.
blanket and I'll like hunker down.
Yeah, that feels good.
And I think it's because really the first, the only deaths I've experienced in my adult life have been very unexpected and tragic.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
funny, like the older you get, the more just experiences we tend to have around that. And it's like, okay, all right. Like,
Yeah.
this is like a part of life and it happens. Does it help when, like, we did the reading? Did it help when you felt connected to your grandmother or to
Yes.
JR and your friend?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Definitely.
maybe next time you're like feeling that anxiety creep up, just be like, hey, can you just come close real quick? Can you
Yeah.
come close and like
Yeah.
help me through this? You might still
Definitely.
feel it, but maybe over
Right.
time, a little less so, or something will come to you that feels, you could even ask them, like, hey, can you tell me what I can do just to feel better to
Yeah.
help this pass quicker or in a good amount of time, right?
Hmm.
But I feel you. I don't have that same fear, but I do understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that you're not alone. And I hope that feels helpful.
It does. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And if any, you know what, if any listeners out there have that same fear, but they have found some tools that are super, super helpful with that, will you please reach out? Like either
Yeah.
comment on the Instagram post that we make or send me an email at Hailey@HaileyFennell.com and we'll post it anonymously for you if you prefer. Or we'll shout you out if you'd like that as well. And maybe we'll add that to another podcast down the road because I think that would actually help quite a few
Hmm.
people. Thank you for
Hmm.
sharing.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on the farmhouse thing that you said because
Yeah.
sometimes I get people, especially ones that listen to this podcast, that are like, "Ooh, like I want to kind of tap in for myself or do what it is that Haley's doing." What they're doing is they're always working with our references, like things that we know about that then we're meant to talk about. So it's kind of like they are putting something in my mind's eye and being like, if Haley talks about this just
Hmm.
enough, it's going to spark something for Molly. And then Molly's going to realize that what we're talking about is actually this other thing.
Right.
And she's going to know intuitively where that message is going. So what they did for me is my grandparents' farmhouse was actually in Alabama, right outside Auburn, Alabama. And it was very, very quiet and peaceful. And even though we had like a complicated relationship, or I will say I had a complicated relationship with my grandparents. I loved that place. It was a great place to like, we spent so much time there. But the loudest thing I can remember from there is the sound of like cicadas and crickets at night.
Yeah.
And when that sound started happening on the recording, that's like all I could think about. It was like just this image of my grandparents' farmhouse, like right there. So then they got me to talk about it. Like
Yeah.
I didn't have a choice. And I just love that. Then you intuitively were like, okay. And sometimes it's this like game of, I know I'm supposed to mention grandparents. I know I'm supposed to mention like a nature like house or a farmhouse. I could maybe hold back on the Alabama part. Like sometimes it's a game of like playing with that. And maybe sometimes I would accidentally say Alabama. And
Hmm.
you'd be like, no, no relation to Alabama. I have no idea what you're talking about. And then sometimes it's like, okay, so maybe that I took the information too far. Like, how can I feel? And they're saying yes with that. That's awesome. Um, Maybe I took the information too far. Like, how can I toggle it back to where it feels better? And it's like a very physical thing in my body where I'm like, oh, it
Yeah.
feels better if I hold off here. It feels better if I expand on it here. So if anyone's listening, they're like, how do you even start? Like, how do you even start just talking about something that is technically for someone else? It's like you kind of just trust what's coming to your mind's eye and then you play with it. Is there anything else from the reading that you wanted to talk about?
I'm trying to think of what else. I know there were a couple like really interesting things that happened.
Or
Oh,
in,
one of them was how you were saying that you were getting this feeling that one of my aunts that is like still living, that we might have had like a different relationship in a past life.
oh, yeah, cool. Yeah.
And I I see myself so much in one of my aunts, and I've been told that like for forever, and she's who I go to for like when I'm really having to make a decision about something that's super important. Like she is the person that I call.
Oh,
And
I
you
love
had
that.
mentioned that like you were getting this feeling that like maybe in a past life we were like a sister or like mother daughter or something, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. Some like I don't talk about past lives all that much in my readings. Every once in a while, occasionally, and I do think it's like a super fun topic. That and aliens. We can talk about that
I
on
love
another
aliens.
podcast. It's like good. I love aliens too. But I do like sometimes it does come across in readings. There's this thing about past lives. I do think that we kind of come back in circles of people. So we tend to have lives with people we've had lives with before. I do think that it's quite possibly infinite.
Hmm.
But we kind of come back at a time and space with circles of people that we've similarly had a life around. I know that there's kind of this thing like, oh, he or she or they are a new soul or an old soul. I don't totally believe in that. I think
Yep.
we are all infinite souls. I think sometimes we can come in like a new soul, which might even mean we've had the most life. Because if we're coming in
Hmm.
like a new soul and just having fun with it, that's kind of the point.
Right.
Or we might come in like an old soul with a lot of wisdom, and it just, for whatever reason, plays a huge part in our life purpose during that time. But the thing with you and your aunt, which could be with some other people too, is sometimes when that comes up, it's because I feel as though you guys would have had quite like a recent and important life with one
Hmm.
another, and then multiple lives coming in at the same time. Now,
Hmm.
sometimes we'll have someone that when I like talk about guides, what I'm usually talking about is people that we've had past lives with that then stayed back this time to help guide us in this lifetime. And then it's just as important to know that we have also held back ourselves to be guides to them at some point too. So, like, we are just as much guides in
Hmm.
some people's lives. And yes, that can mean like right here and now while we're alive, but also it can mean like, okay, so like in mom's life, at some point, I was her guide.
Hmm.
And aunt's life, at some point, even though we've had so many together physically here on this plane, I've also been guide to her. She's also been guide to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But yeah, past lives are
Definitely.
like a really interesting topic. And if anyone ever wants to know about their past life, there's a lot of people that do these past life visuals. You can find a lot of them on YouTube. And you can kind of like lay down and find a really, really good one. Tony Stockwell, I think, does a really good one. And there's also some at like Still Soul that you can go to.
Hmm.
Occasionally, I'll see like someone doing a past life regression there. And they are superb. Stephanie Pixie Morris does one. If you ever catch her at Still Soul, hers are amazing. But if you want to find out a past life of your own, there's a few ways that you can find them. One, you could think about someone that you love quite dearly, like your aunt,
Yep.
and just be like, oh, that's so interesting that we get along so well, or that she's the person I go to. I, I could imagine that our relationship is closer to, than fill in the
Hmm.
blank. And like whatever intuitively comes is probably a reality at some
Yeah.
point. This is kind of one of my, it's an easier way, but one of my favorite ways to think about past lives is like, what place around the world are you oddly the most interested in and you don't know why? Do you have a place that comes to mind when I say that?
Ireland, but I am Irish, so I feel like it makes
That's so cool.
sense that I'm super, super, super interested in Ireland. But I
Yeah.
like really love Ireland.
Yeah. No, have you ever been?
I have not.
Yeah, okay. Even
No.
cooler. Like sometimes we get things like that. We're like, I don't even know why,
Yeah.
but I like have to go at some point in my life, right? Mine's
Hmm.
Australia. Like I don't know
Hmm.
why, and I can't believe I haven't been, but I have to go at some point. There's other places too. There's also Egypt for me. Like I just
Yep.
know. It just like even saying that out loud, like Egypt, like it just feels like
Yeah.
home all of a sudden. So we can like
I
play
want
with
to
it
go to
that way.
Iceland. Iceland has always,
Iceland. Ooh, I
yeah,
could
like
see
has always
that.
kind of called to me. I like cold, snowy stuff.
Oh, I really, yeah. And that, like, there's like, we are given hints of what our soul has been. I was about to say attracted to in the past, but it's more what our soul has experienced in the
Hmm.
past lives. That we're like, oh gosh, like that just feels like home. And maybe in that life you didn't like the cold, but now
Right.
it feels like home, so you do like it. I mean, there's just so many ways to play with it. But
Yeah.
the more we trust that, and the more we allow ourselves to like deepen it and get into it, we might even be revealed like a little bit more of the story over time. Like,
Hmm.
for example, if I trust that I have that whenever I say the word Egypt, it feels like home to me. If I start to research Egypt and look at pictures and like get into the history of it, it like fills me up. It just
Hmm.
gives me so much energy and there's no point to it. I'm not really planning on doing anything with that interest other than it just fills me up. And every once in a while, like I need a little, it's kind of like taking a shot of espresso. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, like I got energy for the rest of the day because I just allowed myself to kind of read a little article about something that I find interesting. Like that's
Hmm.
it. That's all there is to it. We can also kind of, there's some people, have you ever done like a past life? Have you ever done a past life regression?
I haven't.
There's some people, this is going to be controversial in this world. There's some people that might do a past life regression in order to do what we would call in this world cutting the cord.
Hmm.
Because occasionally some people, or psychic mediums is what I mean by some people, psychic mediums will say that, oh, like you have a connection to a past life and it's bad and you need to like cut the energy to move on in this life. I don't totally believe in that. I
Hmm.
don't think that we come into this life with needing to separate ourselves out from the past life. In fact, I think sometimes we come into this life and we're meant to just live this life, whether we connect into past lives or not. But sometimes we're like reminded of a past life just to give us the strength to move forward in this
Hmm.
life. So even if something bad happened in a past life or something painful or hurtful happened in a past life, it's more coming up sometimes because we're meant to be reminded of how much strength we have
Hmm.
and that we're here in this life and we're safe and it's okay to like harness in that strength and move forward. And I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. No, definitely.
And if anyone has any questions on that, they're welcome to just reach out.
Now, what do
But
you
is,
think about dreams?
oh yeah, dreams are one of my favorite topics to talk about. I have lots of different theories about dreams.
Like, I have crazy dreams. I have recurring dreams. I have recurring dreams that, like, it's not the same dream every night, but it's a continuation of that dream, like in the same house with the same
Ooh,
people, but like plants are dying and like, but then my plants are living. Like, it's like so
interesting.
weird.
That is, how do you feel in the dream? Is it different every time or is it generally the
Kind
same?
of different every time, but like more so than not, like unsettled, to be honest. Like,
Unsettled?
I feel like most of
Yeah.
my dreams have a very eerie, creepy, nervous feeling to them.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I've been in that boat where I've like nonstop for months had dreams like that. This is kind of sort of my theory around it, and we can play with it. But in general, I think that sometimes we have eerie dreams or scary dreams or nightmares because it's a way for us to manifest something that's not meant for us in this lifetime.
Hmm.
Because if thoughts become things, though I will say it's thoughts paired with actions that are the things that really become things. But if we have a fear of thoughts becoming things, and sometimes our mind's like, okay, well, don't worry about it. I'll give it to you in a dream and then it won't become a
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
So that's like one way of looking at it. Then if we're like, wait, but I had this really good dream that I would like to come true, it's like, sure, sure, sure. So sometimes dreams can also be the thing that inspire us to take action.
Hmm.
So as long as we are either not or taking action on it, those are the things that are actually going to manifest. And then sometimes I do think we have this like subconscious thing going on, especially with what you're saying. It's like the same dream over and over, but these certain elements kind of shift and change there. If we were to like really get in there and look at it, it's like, okay, so maybe it's more like I need to change my perspective on something
Yeah.
and like allow the dream to grow or allow myself to like take myself outside of the house. Is this like a lucid dream that you can like somewhat control?
Yeah,
That's okay.
kinda. And like,
Okay.
and it's like the type of thing that I will literally like, I'll wake up and be like, damn, I'm dreaming that again. I'm gonna get up, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, I'm gonna get back in bed, I'll be out of the dream. And I'll lay back in
Yeah.
bed and I am back in the dream.
Oh, that's even more wild. I would say that usually shakes it up, but like if I can't
Oh my God, it's
get
so
out of the dream, I have to
crazy.
like get up and go to the
And like,
bathroom.
the
Yeah.
thing is most of them, nothing crazy's happening.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a town that I think is Charleston, but it's not. And there's always this street that's flooded. And then there's like a really busy airport. And then there's like always things happening. And when it was snowing, it was snowing.
Oh,
And,
wild.
but like, it's just the weirdest thing. And then I will say that probably every single night. And also, like, I'm on Prozac, I'm on antidepressants, so I feel like that can alter my sleep. I also take magnesium to go to sleep. I feel like that can
Mhm.
probably alter your sleep. Um, I have lots of dreams about like big tidal waves
Oh,
that are,
interesting.
that like, and I'm always like shark tooth hunting because I love to shark tooth hunt. I have a big
Uh-huh.
shark tooth collection, and it's always like I'm like looking at the sand and I look up and it's just like this wave that's about to wash me away. And it's
Yeah.
just terrifying.
You could play a game with yourself, and this would be more of a daydream. Like if you were to take one of those dreams and kind of lay down and let it happen. Like, okay, so the wave
Yeah,
is coming, the wave is going to take me. What happens after the wave takes me? And like
yeah,
let your daydream state, and then you're more in charge of it then. So the point
yeah.
of that is not to think worst case scenario. If you do for a second, that's fine, but let the wave take you somewhere that you can control. Like,
Hmm.
oh, it's actually taking me to this beautiful place. Or why is the wave coming over me? This time I'm going to say that the wave is coming over me because something really powerful is about to happen in my life
Yeah,
and I'm meant to go with the flow.
yeah,
Like you
yeah,
can kind of choose. And then next time the dream comes up, kind of see what happens.
yeah.
If in the middle of that Charleston kind of not Charleston, not Charleston dream,
Hmm.
if you can control it, you try to stand still for a second in the dream and just be like, what place is this really? Like, give it a question and
Yeah.
see if it kind of like answers back. And then know that it's your mind answering back and you're in control of it.
Hmm.
Sometimes we think of spirit and our souls and our guides and those on the other side as like this outside source. And it is, like, because it's easier to communicate with it out there. But it can also be an internal thing that we can get for ourselves. And so it's like, okay, so if we're thinking of dreams as this thing that comes from outside of us, that's perfect and fine. But then we also have to kind of start to admit to ourselves that dreams, especially, are this thing that comes from within
Right.
that we can ask, like, why that's happening in our mind.
Yeah.
And you might not be able to control it when you're actually asleep. But if you can for a second, and then even if it doesn't take the turns that like feel that good to you,
Hmm.
you could be like, okay, well, at least that was something different. Like I
Right.
shifted it.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have any other questions about that?
I don't think so. I like
Um,
I I also have dreams about like high school, like having like these assignments that like, oh my God, I never even knew about this assignment. I haven't done it. I
Uh-huh.
haven't finished it. I don't even know where it is. I don't remember my class schedule or how to get to these buildings. Like, and I know that that's probably shit I need to work on and like talk in therapy about. But it is just like dreams are, it is such a weird state of consciousness. It freaks me out.
It really is because it's like it feels, yeah. I mean, they're bizarre. I have one that we all go to high school. Like this is everyone in the whole world. We all go to high school and then we do whatever, like whether it's college or something else, that's fine. But like a certain amount of years go by. But like by law, we then have to go back to high school and finish like the exams that we all didn't take. And so
Like
I,
makes me nauseous.
me
That is the
too.
scariest thing in the world.
Because I'm like, I don't. And I'm like trying to
Oh,
explain to the people, they're like, but I already graduated. Like, I don't have to be here. Like, my life is good. Like, I have a job.
yeah.
Like, I'm fine. I'm like, I have to like try to convince them that I actually don't need to come back. And they're like, no, you
No,
gotta come
Haley, you
back.
do
Yeah, you haven't, they're like, you
a
haven't
lot.
graduated yet. And in like my life, I'm like, but I have like a master's, like I have like and they're like, that doesn't count because you never graduated high school. I'm like,
My friend.
yeah, it's like the worst. Um, and I don't know. I don't know how to make heads or
Yeah,
tails of it.
right.
Other than that's like a legit fear of like, you can't make
Yes.
me.
That
Like,
is
I
so
don't.
scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I wake up and I'm like, I'm so glad that
Oof.
that happened in my dream and not in real
Right?
life. Yeah.
Oh my God. I love how things are going right now.
Yeah. But I will say in general, just to help like soothe anyone that's listening that like has fears of dreams coming true, I don't think we can always control our dreams. When we can, whatever. But the point is that your dreams are not the things coming true. There's going to be someone out there that's like, no, like I had this dream and it came true. You might have a gift then, like a little dream gift thing.
Mhm.
But in general, we can kind of be like, oh, cool, that happened in my dream because it's not meant to happen
Yeah.
in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Molly. I really
Of course.
appreciate it. Is there anything
Yeah.
else you want to add?
No, I think that was the gist.
Yeah, well, thank
Yeah.
you for being game, for hopping back on. Again, I'm going to leave it up to Lindsay, but she'll kind of pop in the sound of the previous reading in here at some point. Maybe we'll even let you listen to like the first, I think it's about 5 minutes long right now. But before we do that, Molly, can you tell people how they can follow you and find you and when and where they can take your classes?
Yeah. You can follow me on Instagram at malmacyogi, and you can find me at all three of the Works Yoga locations, so the Sweat location downtown and Mount Pleasant, as well as the Works Renew.
Oh, thank you. Awesome. You guys go follow her. And just in case Lindsay decides to drop it in right here, here's the first 5 minutes of the reading that we didn't quite get recorded all the way. Thank you, Molly.
Thanks, Haley.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome back to House Guest with me, Hailey Lowe Fennel. I'm a psychic medium, and today I get to sit down with the lovely Molly McLean. Thank you so much for being here, Molly.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Molly is from The Works, so we've had The Works team on before, and we've had Sarah on before, so you guys can go back to those episodes and listen to those to get. And we've had Susan Lake has been on. Oh gosh, I should probably like have a list going. There's some and Taylor.
Kira. Yeah,
Yes,
there's Cody.
yes. I'm like there's a lot of really good people. We'll put it all in the show notes,
Yeah.
so you guys can go back. But thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being open enough. And I'm going to start off with a mini reading for Molly and just kind of like be open and see where it goes. And then I'm going to ask you some questions and you can ask me some questions in the whole good deal. Does that sound good?
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm just kind of getting comfortable. And I'm going to close my eyes for a little bit. And if you want to close your eyes too, you are welcome. If it feels better to leave them open, that's okay too. And either way, to start taking a few really good deep breaths. And then just start to imagine that we're meeting in a field, a really wide open field. Imagine our souls meeting in this field and starting to connect and starting to communicate and starting to share everything that we need to know between each other for today, for here, for now. And then start to imagine anyone you know who has passed away and is on the other side coming forward, no matter how long it's been or how short it's been. No matter what kind of person they were, knowing that they are loving and supportive from where they are now. And imagine your guides coming forward, meeting us in this field. Imagine them stepping forward. My guides starting to communicate with your guides. And take a few really good deep breaths. And then just imagine everyone coming closer and closer, meeting us in that space at the same time, meeting us in this space. And then a few more really good deep breaths. And you can open your eyes when you want. Okay, I'm going to ask you a funny question. Do you hear that sound?
Yeah.
Okay, is it my computer or is it yours?
I don't know. It's like definitely coming out of my speakers, but I do hear it.
Oh, now it's like dying down.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know. It's getting like really loud at one point.
I know. Might be some spirits at play. I mean, I still kind of hear it in the background.
Yeah.
We'll just keep going, but that is funny. Okay, let's see. I am gonna just make sure. Okay. So when I'm closing my eyes and I mention the guides part, like your guides kind of coming into that space, sometimes what I'm doing, I'm going to explain this for anyone that's kind of doing what it is that I'm doing. Sometimes what I'm doing is just kind of settling into this like really nice imaginative space and seeing what wants to come forward first. And by what, instead of saying who, sometimes it's like guides that like to come forward first. I feel some people there on the other side, but I have this one kind of main guide that hovers right in front of me. And I kept asking them to come into a certain spot to show me like what kind of family member they were. And they're like, we're just going to hover for now. The way they hover, they might also be a family member. So if it starts to sound familiar, you just let me know.
Yep.
But the way they hover is a little bit more guide-like to me, the way they're like right out in front of me and feel like really warm and good. Okay, I'm going to close my eyes for a second. All right, I know this is going to sound funny. I'm having a hard time with the sound.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do is, do you want to log off and then let's jump back on and just see if it says it? I'm so sorry.
No, all good.
I'm like, I'm going to be able to start talking about it.